On behalf of CESA, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our members and other interested viewers. Thank you for joining us today for our first webinar on the CESA Management System Declarations, which are also known as the MSDs. As you'll hear during the presentations, the MSDs were developed and introduced in December 2020, last year, with the aim of assisting members to meet the mandatory CESA requirements regarding quality, integrity, and sustainability management. I will be your moderator for this webinar, so kindly allow me to introduce myself. My name is Wally Main, and I'm a civil engineer occupying the position of Contractual Affairs Manager at CESA. This webinar, which may be followed by a second MSD webinar early in the new year, is intended to provide members and those responsible for completing the MSDs with a broad understanding of and familiarity with the MSDs, thus making it easier to complete them. They will form part of the annual declaration pack that goes out to members in early December 2021, just as the packs went out in December 2020. Members should note that in order to qualify for the annual CESA membership certificates, it is expected that they complete their annual declarations in full, including the MSDs. I would also like to inform you that the webinar is being recorded and that the presentations will be available on the CESA website after the webinar. They will be available under the YouTube icon, and the link will be forwarded to delegates. Before we get started, I'd just like to outline some of the house rules for you, our delegates. On the taskbar at the bottom of the screen, you will see the Q&A icon. Please use the Q&A icon for your questions, which will be addressed in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Please don't put questions in the chat icon, because then it becomes very difficult to manage. I'd like to encourage you to submit any questions you would like to ask and to kindly indicate which of the panelists you would like to answer your questions. And also please identify yourself so that if we don't answer your question, we can identify you and get back to you with an answer. So to unpack today's topics, we are fortunate to have 4 distinguished, top-notch panelists joining us. The first panelist will be Charles Cellier, who is a professional civil engineer and a technical director at our member firm Jones and Wagner, and he is an active member of the CESA Quality Risk and Sustainability Committee. Charles is the current president of GIGSA, GIGSA, which stands for the Geosynthetics Interest Group of South Africa. The second panelist will be Diane Liebenberg, who is a professional structural engineer. She is a member of the CESA Quality Risk and Sustainability Committee and a lecturer at the CESA School of Consulting Engineering. Diane is passionate about quality management and has her own consulting practice in quality management, where she mainly advises consulting engineers on how to obtain the ISO 9001 certification. Diane is currently the chairperson of the subcommittee that manages the development and implementation of these MSDs. And as a matter of interest, the other 3 panelists are also members of this subcommittee. Our third panelist, Philip Boyens, is also a professional civil engineer, and he is an active member of the CESA Quality Risk and Sustainability Committee. Philip is a director of the SCIP Engineering Group, Skip Engineering, a CESA member firm, and he is also the secretary of the Gauteng CESA branch. The fourth panelist will be Roxanne Dovey, who is an expert and a seasoned practitioner in the field of sustainability. Roxanne is an active member of the CESA Quality Risk and Sustainability Committee, and she has her own practice consulting in sustainability. I would like to thank the panelists greatly for joining us today. They will each deliver their presentations, and only after all the presentations will there be a question and answer session. Then the proceedings will end with some closing remarks. And I'd just like to remind the panelists that they each have been allocated 15 minutes for their presentations. The first panelist to address us this afternoon is Charles Cilliers, who will provide us with an overview of the CSER management system. That's the overall management system. Having been involved with the developments of the MSDs from the beginning of the project, Charles is well qualified to address us on this topic. And I'd just like to hand over to Charles. Charles?
Thank you very much, Wally, for that kind introduction. So yes, I indeed have been on the QRS CSER committee for a number of years and have been involved with the development of the management system declarations from the start. So I will share my experience with you. So I'd like to start by just going through the presentation contents. I'll just discuss the initial checklists that were available at the time when I started with the committee. Then I'll talk about the identification of the FIDIC guidelines that we found very useful as reference documents for the development of the MSDs. I'll then talk about how we developed the declarations to what you see today. I'll briefly discuss how to access them on the website, and then talk about how they're structured, and lastly end off with how we aim to optimize them going forward. So the first two checklists I would like to discuss that were available initially when I started was the Quality Management Implementation Guideline, referred to generally as the QMEG. And the purpose of this document was to verify that members have a system in place that manages the quality of their work. It was a brief guideline followed by a checklist of a number of questions which members could use to figure out where they stand in terms of the development of their quality management system. The next checklist was the Risk Management Implementation Guideline, known as the RMIG. And the purpose of this guideline is to assist members in managing the risk in both project level and in their business. I'd just like to say that these documents have also recently been updated with the declarations attached where applicable, and will be available on the CSER website in early 2022. The third checklist that was available at the time was the Sustainability Guideline and Checklist. This was a very basic guideline with a short checklist at the end, and was used to assist members with managing their projects and businesses in a sustainable way. And lastly, the Business Integrity Management Guideline. And the purpose of this guideline was to ensure members always act with integrity within their business. So the QMEG was based on FIDIC's interpretation of ISO 9001, but the 2008 version, and needed to be updated to the 2015 based interpretation. There were quite a lot of changes from the 2008 to 2015 version, and it was felt that quite an overhaul of the checklist was required. CSER appointed an external auditing consultant to update the checklist, but when we received it back, we considered it quite cumbersome. There were over 100 questions, and some of them were double-barrel questions. So we felt that it needed to be simplified. At the same time, CSER identified a need within the industry to confirm that member firms were implementing a quality, integrity, and sustainability management system. And so we did some general investigation and found that FIDIC had a number of guides for these management systems, which were really quite useful. So for the quality management system, we found the FIDIC guide to the interpretation and application of the ISO 9001-2015 standard. And the good thing about this reference is that FIDIC essentially took the ISO 9001 standard, which is written generally for companies, and interpreted it for the needs of a consulting engineering company. Likewise, for the integrity and for the sustainability management systems, FIDIC had guidelines for these as well, specifically for integrity, the FIDIC guidelines for integrity management in the consulting industry, part 1 and 2, and for sustainability, the Project Sustainability Management Applications Manual, 2nd edition, 2013. So we used the FIDIC guidelines as references, and we developed the various MSDs as follows. For the quality MSD, we took that cumbersome checklist that was provided by the consultant, and we simplified it, and we provided references in the FIDIC guideline that could be used to follow up and get more information on the specific questions. For the integrity MSD and sustainability MSD, we developed these from new, but with references to the FIDIC guidelines. After the MSDs were developed to a certain level, we circulated them amongst the CISA QRS committee, and various members completed the checklists as if they were member firms completing it for the first time. The comments we received helped quite a bit to make the declarations more applicable and easier to use. We also drafted a guideline on completing the MSDs, and this is available when filling out the MSD. There's a link at the top of the MSD which takes you to this guideline. CISA then appointed their website developer to convert the MSDs from being paper-based to being an online form to be filled in. At this time, CISA decided to make the completion of the MSDs mandatory to address the need of confirming member management system status. The declarations were linked to the annual declaration, which goes out annually in November, December. A requirement for providing evidence in the MSDs is required for CISA to do verification on an ad hoc basis to confirm that members are doing what they say they are doing. This results in the assurance that CISA members have all 3 management systems in place at varying levels of development. So I just wanted to clarify that, when going through the MSDs and answering the questions, it will become quite clear each member what level of development they are. And what CISA would like to see over the years of filling out the MSDs going forward is a clear advance in development. So I'd just like to quickly go through how one accesses the MSDs on the CISA website. So this should look familiar to most members. You click in through the member login. This takes you to a site where you can put in your username and password. These are available from CISA if you do not have them. This takes you to a list of very useful documents, but I would just like to hone in on the annual declaration. And basically, once you go there, you'll access the MSDs and you'll be faced with a structure looking as shown on the screen. So a legend here was developed just to quickly run through the structure. I'll go from points 1 to 7 just to indicate what you see on the screen. So column 1 is essentially the MSD number. When we go through the later webinars or sections of the webinar today, it will be reflected how many numbers are in each MSD, but that's for clear reference. Then column 2 and column 3 are the clauses that one can reference for further information in the FIDIC documents. So for each MSD, there's FIDIC documents which are referenced, and you can track the specific question via those references. Column 4 is the question at hand, and it's followed by a paragraph of additional information. So in this case, has top management documented an integrity policy statement which considers the strategic objectives of the organization, and then additional information which provides context as to why that question is important. Then number 5, there's a place for each member to answer yes, they have an integrity policy statement, or no, or not applicable. If yes, there's an area here to fill in what evidence is available. And here, like I said earlier, it's important to note that This documentation does not need to be submitted to CSER for every MSD filled out, but merely to be confirmed that the evidence is at hand should that member firm be selected for verification by CSER. And then lastly, if not applicable, to give justification. So in this case, a suitable justification may be that it's a single member firm and the company acts on that person's personal integrity. And that would be the justification in that case. Then just the last slide on optimization. So the first round of declarations were completed and sent out in 2020 or 2021. The percentage of members that completed the MSDs was low. However, CSER are investigating ways to increase the numbers in 2022. One of the ideas was to have this current webinar where we just give the reasons why these MSDs are so important and why they've been developed. But then also to say that issuing member certificates will only be to those members who have completed the MSDs in 2022. In 2021, good feedback was received from the industry, particularly on the sustainability declaration. This led to the co-option of a sustainability specialist to assist us with revising the MSD for 2022. And we hope for similar evolving on the integrity and quality MSD going forward. So please, if you do have comments, please share them with us. We aim to make these applicable and suitable for members' use going forward. Thank you. That was my last slide. And Wally, I'm going to hand over back to you.
Thank you, Charles, for so ably presenting on this topic and providing us with the framework and understanding of the CSER management system, which, as you saw, encompasses the 3 MSDs. As previously mentioned, the presentation will be available on the CSER website. And at this point, I'd like to inform delegates that as a benefit of membership, CSER tries hard to empower members with useful information and through the presentation of webinars such as this one. Next up, next presenter is Diane Liebenberg, second panelist, who's going to address us on the Quality Management System Declaration, also known as the QMS MSD. Diane was generally involved in the development of the MSDs, but was largely responsible for the development of the Quality MSD. As Diane lectures and consults in quality management systems, there's no better placed person to address us on this topic. And at this point, I'd like to hand over to Diane. Diane?
Great. Thank you, Wally, and thanks for introducing me. And welcome to everyone who's joined the webinar. As Wally has said, today I'll be focusing on the Management System Declaration, or the MSD as we call it, for quality management systems. So Charles already given you a very broad overview of all the MSDs, but I'll be delving specifically into the requirements of the Quality Management System, MSD. So just to give you a quick overview of what I'll be talking about today, we're first going to focus on the FDIC documents and on which the requirements of the MSD are based. I will also touch on other documents which CSER provides that can help you to develop and improve your quality management systems. I then actually just want to have a look a bit at ISO 9001 certification and the implications this has on your MSD completions. And then I just want to run through each section of the quality MSD in detail. The main sections of the MSD being the business strategy, leadership and planning. The second section focuses on project delivery and the requirements associated with each stage. Then the third section looks at the requirements for support services. And finally, the last section of the MSD looks at performance evaluation and how to improve your system. And then just to round off the presentation, we're just going to touch on the benefits of implementing an effective quality management system. Great. So as Charles mentioned, each of the MSDs are based on a FDIC guideline. The quality MSDs is based on two FIDIC guidelines. The first is the FIDIC guideline to quality management in the consulting engineering industry. So the objective of this guideline is to provide an introduction and background information on quality systems. And it also showcases the benefits of implementing such a system. It also outlines what constitutes a quality management system with specific focus on consulting and engineering firms. So the guideline gives you really practical guidance on how to initiate the development of a system, specifically again for a consulting engineering firm. The second guideline is the FIDIC Guide to the Interpretation and Application of the ISO 9001 2015 standard for the consulting engineering industry. So this guideline focuses purely on the ISO 9001 standard and how you need to interpret the requirements of the standard and how to apply these requirements specifically to a consulting engineering firm. These guidelines can be purchased online from the FIDIC bookstore. So other documentation which CISA has available is the QMEG, which Shoal touched on, and that is the Quality Management Implementation Guideline. And there are also a variety of practice notes that talk to quality management. So all these documents are available on the CISA.net and are available to member firms at absolutely no additional cost. So then I just want to go through ISO 9001 certification and your MSD. If your organization has developed a system which complies to ISO 9001 and to which you are certified, you are not required to complete the questions of the quality MSD. You will, however, be required to supply details of your certification. So these details basically include the name of your certification body, the certificate registration number, the validity date of your certificate, and as well as the first date of your certification. Now, if you're not certified to ISO 9001 and you don't hold a valid ISO 9001 certificate, you will be required to complete all 38 questions contained within the MSD. For all the other MSDs, the integrity and the project sustainability, you are requested to submit details of any certifications that you might have pertaining to those management systems. But unlike the quality MSD, you are still required to complete all the questions. But Philip and Roxanne will go into this in a bit more detail in the following presentations. Then also just please note that the completion of the quality MSD does not mean you are ready for ISO certification. It means you've addressed some requirements of the standard. So just to note, the ISO 9001 standard has approximately 64 requirements to which you need to comply with. And our MSD only asks for clarification on 38 of these requirements. Great, so I think let's just unpack the main sections of the MSD. The first section of the MSD deals with management, and in 9 questions, you'll be requested to provide evidence to prove that management has bought into the system and constantly drives the system to improve it. So this is really important. We see time and time again, if our managers are not leading by example, the quality system will not function as effectively as it should. So also in this section, you'll be asked if you have a business strategy or a plan, and if this plan identifies how internal and external factors can impact on your business. So an interesting example of an external factor which has greatly impacted on organizations is COVID. This has basically changed many business strategies, just with regard to the way that we work, how we protect our people, and in some instances, even what is our strategic focus. Now, the first section of the MSD also focuses a lot on documentation. So it will ask you if you have defined your processes, have you documented your scope and your quality policy? Have you identified objectives which will help you to achieve your strategy and policy? The section also goes on to look at staff requirements and the importance of communicating the requirements of the quality system to the staff. Your MSD will also require that staff are trained on how to use the quality system, and very important that roles and responsibilities and authorities have been defined and communicated throughout the organization. And then lastly, you need to demonstrate that you identify risk and opportunity throughout the business and that you have plans put into place to help manage these risks and opportunities. The next section of the MSD deals with project delivery. So during stage 1, which is your inception stage, it's very important to ensure that all project requirements are identified and formally documented. So this can be done through contracts or proposals, bids, tenders, that's up to you. For stages 2 and 3, which focuses purely on design, it's very important to plan your project. So have a project plan in place that takes into account how we deliver the project, what are our milestones, who will be working on the project, have you identified risk and mitigating actions? So there are quite a few things to do to include in your plan. You'll then also need to review everything you do. The first very important one is review inputs for adequacy. And this deals with all external information on which you will base your design. So make sure it's adequate for you to use. You don't need to approve the inputs. You just have to satisfy yourself that they are adequate for use going forward. And then check, check, and check again. This is something I cannot stress enough. You must have evidence of all reviews, verifications, and validations. And you can be very creative in this regard. You can redline documents, you can activate track changes, you can insert comments. So just make sure that you do retain evidence of all your reviews. And then during the design process as well, you'll need to show how you manage change. So implement change registers or look at keeping separate change approval records. Stage 4, which talks to documentation and procurement, the MSD will look at how can you demonstrate evidence of approval prior to release. And this I generally say to guys is do it with an electronic signature or similar. With section 4, also make sure that you keep your transmittal records. So even if you are challenged regarding the cause of the delay, you have evidence to prove otherwise. And then just stage 5 of project delivery talks to construction. So in this stage, I always say keep records of everything. You need to have records of inspections, monitoring records, diaries, test results, and make sure you have a copy of these records in your office. And again, if you're using monitoring and measuring devices on site, ensure that they're calibrated as required and have evidence confirming the calibration. And then finally, just stage 6 of project delivery. You need to make sure that you close out your project correctly. This is generally the stage that we all like to skip because we just want to get on to the next project. But please ensure you close out. Check that all project requirements have been met. And very importantly, get feedback from your clients and interested parties, just so that you can basically improve your systems going forward. Great. Then the third section of the MSD looks at support services. So human resources is the first one. The MSD will explore if your staff are competent and if required, are additional actions undertaken to ensure an increase in competency. The second part of support services touches on financial management. The MSD will look at how do you maintain your financial records. The third support service, supply chain management. This is very important. And the MSD explores how do you control outsourced activities as well as evaluating and reevaluating your suppliers. The fourth support service is organizational knowledge. And this basically determines whether you maintain libraries of information and if you make this information readily available to staff. Then the second last support service is infrastructure management. This just makes sure that you control and maintain your buildings and all your associated facilities. It also looks at controlling equipment, transportation resources, and basically everything, just that you can make sure that your staff have the correct tools and environment to execute their work. And then finally, the last support service is documented information. So ensure you are storing and protecting your documents. Make sure they are retrievable. And then by the use of templates and standards, just to ensure consistency in the production of your documentation. And then finally, the last question of the MSD deals with performance management. And this basically just ensures that the organization is continually improving. So in order to do this, the organization needs to identify what data it will collect, how it will analyze this data, and then basically demonstrate the performance of the organization. So client feedback is basically a crucial type of the data that you can collect and analyze. Then you'll also need to ensure that you conduct audits on your system and that all non-conformances identified are corrected and measures are basically put into place to prevent them from occurring in the future. So that was quite a mouthful, but what I've done, I've just included a graphic that shows the different sections of the ISO 9001 standard. And you can just see how does the MSD relate to those sections. So you can find this graphic, it has been included in the revised QMEG in section 5, which I think should be released, I think, later this year or early next year. So we spoke about the first main section of the MSD being strategy, leadership, and planning. And this basically talks to the orange and red and blue blocks, which refer to the first 4 sections of the ISO standard. And this is basically your context, your leadership, and planning. The second section of the MSD is the gray block in the middle. And this refers to your operations or your project delivery. The third section of the MSD refers to support services, which is represented by the green block. And that has all your ISO 9001 requirements stated there. And then we basically, you see how all these processes feed into the purple circle, which is performance evaluation. And that's the last section of the MSD. And this is basically where data is collected from all the different processes. It's analyzed and then presented to management to ensure continual improvement. So please refer back to this graphic when you are completing your MSD. It will give you a lot of input. It will give you a lot of guidance. And then finally, just to have a quick touch on why do we need quality? So the 2 biggest reasons as to why we need quality is that firstly, it prevents things from going wrong. And when things do go wrong, it protects you against claims and challenges. So in order to prevent things from going wrong, you must have an effective quality management system. And this must be embraced and implemented throughout the organization. But I say, even if you have an effective quality management system in place, things can still go wrong. I mean, we're all human, and unfortunately, we are going to make errors. It is then that the evidence or records required by your quality system will protect you. So unfortunately, it's only when things do go wrong that most organizations see the full benefit of implementing a quality system. And ultimately, then they only see the value of producing comprehensive and accurate records. And just to give you an example, last year, Aon reported that more than 40% of the claims originated during the design process. So this just highlights the need for check-in. I mean, do your checks, do your verifications, make sure you validate it. And then also just make sure that they're enforced throughout project delivery. And as I said earlier on, remember to retain records of these checks. This year, a large number of claims are arising from the appointment of inexperienced or unqualified people undertaking work. So this just also highlights the need for competency checks and ongoing competency checks, which is definitely a requirement in the MSD. And then just quickly to touch on other benefits of quality, it basically will enhance your reputation. It will help you to win more work. It reduces risk and errors, and naturally, at the end of the day, it's going to save you money. Right, so that's me done on quality management and the management system declaration. Charles has touched on this, but I just wanted to reinforce this issue. The MSD is not there to catch you out. It's basically a guide for you on how to implement an effective quality management system. And I always say to member firms, don't worry if you can't answer all the questions. The questions are there just to determine the level of development of your system. So CISA just wants to see that, are you committed to implementing a system, and are you committed to improving that on an ongoing basis? So I think that's me in a nutshell. I just want to wish you, everyone, all the best of luck in your development and implementation of your quality systems and in the completion of the MSDs. If anyone requires more information or would like to get in touch with me, please contact Wally and he'll pass on the contact information. Then thank you for everyone for attending, and Wally, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you, Diane. It was a very enlightening presentation. And thank you for giving us really valuable guidelines and practical pointers on the quality MSD and explaining the need for such a system. And I'm sure it's going to be of great value to the members that complete this MSD, and which they can find a copy of your presentation on the CESA website. So our third panelist is Philip Boyens, who's going to address us on the FIDIC Integrity Management System Declaration, or as it's known, the FIMS FIMS MSD. So with over 25 years experience in our industry, Philip is well qualified to address us on this topic. And I'd now like to hand over to Philip. So it's over to you, Philip.
Thank you very much, Wally, for that introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us in the session. Hopefully, I can assist to shed some light on the FIMS, the FIDIC Integrity Management System. And yeah, so here we go. Where's the click button? There we go. This is the contents of my presentation. I will briefly give the overview of the FIDIC documents that the FIMS is based upon, which Charles already highlighted is part 1 of the FIDIC document, which covers the policies and principles, and then part 2 that covers the procedures. Then very briefly touch on the 3 sections of the MSD. Diane has dealt with the quality one in quite detail. I'm just going to mention it because the questions are fairly straightforward when completing the MSD. As you saw in Charles' presentation, the layout and the setup of the MSD. And then lastly, again, just briefly touch on the benefits of implementing a FIMS in your organization. These are the 2 documents that the FIMS have been based upon. It's part 1 and part 2. And you can see how the documents look on the side there. And it's 2001 release and 2015. And I really encourage you to get copies of these documents because they really give you the background and state the business case of the value of implementing integrity management system in your organization. And working from the euros, it's in the region of about 400 Rand per document. The part 1 document covers the policies and principles, and it really deals with 2 objectives. The first objective is to provide background information on the integrity management and present a business case as to why the consulting engineering firm should adopt effective integrity management practices. And then also it puts a few things in place which should be adopted by all firms, irrespective of their size, location, their capacity, or the present conditions of where they are doing their business. This is a screenshot of the index of the part 1 document. And you can see what topics are covered. There's a very informative background section. And what is very valuable from this document is Appendix B, which is a code of conduct for consulting firms, which they provide as a sort of a starting point to create your own code of conduct for your company. Then in part 2, that covers more of the procedures. And then in this document, they delve much deeper into the hows and also provide sample documents and text sheets and forms in the annexures. The two objectives from this document is to provide the member firms guidance on developing, as they say, scalable, and that's again what the idea is to start somewhere and then just always improve on the system and eventually have a fully fledged firm system in place. And all of this is based on the best practices and research that was done globally to deal with anti-corruption, and there's various legislations that's listed, and there's some resources in the annexures as well to look at. And then it just describes on how to design and implement it and create the practices. Again, here's the contents from that document. You can see all the items that they are dealing with and talking and discussing, and the ways that the firms is developed. And again, going to the annexures or the appendixes, there's an example again of a code of conduct, and then they've got the various sample forms that has been implemented by other firms, and that can be a starting point to create your own firms. Just some interesting facts that I discovered in the documents. The World Bank at the moment estimates the total volume of bribes paid annually as $1 trillion. And I wrote it out there just to get the dramatic effect. It's a massive number. They place it on 5% of global GDP. And in most instances, there's two sides to a coin. There's the bribe payer and the bribe receiver. So it, as they say, it takes two to tango. FIDIC intentionally chose the term integrity management, and the purpose of that was to create a more proactive approach to ethical behavior, rather than stating just anti-corruption, which implies a defensive action. So the idea is, if your company and your staff subscribes to high ethical and integrity, their actions will lead to fewer situations where you could get into difficult places. Developing the firms presents an ideal opportunity for a consulting company to introduce improved business practices designed to enhance the quality of the business management. And then the firms is designed to encourage ethical conduct and compliance with the law to combat supply side corruption. And that is the fancy word for the side of the bribe giver. Essentially, the way to build the firms would be you start with your code of conduct, which you can use from that Appendix A in Part 2. And then that is sort of driven by top management. It's communicated throughout the company. The code of conduct is published publicly. And then from there, you develop your integrity management policies. And then ultimately, this combines in creating your firm's framework going forward. Now, getting to the MSD for integrity, it is intended for the members to create an opportunity for them to show that they have the system in place. And if you don't have it yet, as been mentioned throughout the presentation, feel free to answer no and then give a reason. And from year to year, CISA would like to see improvement and continuous implementation and commitment to getting the MSD for integrity answered with hopefully all yes answers. There is 17 questions. You answer yes or no. And as Charles explained earlier on, if you answer yes, you must provide documentation. If you answer no, you must give a reason. And if you say not applicable, then you must sort of at least explain why do you say that's not applicable to your company. The MSD has got these 3 main sections. There's 7 questions under the integrity management in business strategy, planning and leadership. Then there's 6 questions under the integrity management in project delivery, and then 4 questions under integrity management in systems performance and evaluation. And the underlying philosophy of the integrity system is to identify risks that can go in 2 directions. One, it could be a form of criminality that you can get yourself into. The other could be in a form of bad publicity or losing credibility as a trusted provider of engineering services. One of the benefits of implementing FIMS is that you could ultimately, once your FIMS is in place, could ultimately apply for ISO 37001 certification, and that becomes important when you start working on especially development bank funded projects. And the great thing about all of this is that this document has recently been published by FIDIC, and it is available as a free download from their website. The link is there at the bottom of the page, and that is to move from your FIMS into ISO 37001 certification. And the last benefit that could be for the bigger multinationals is if you would like to work on projects that is funded by development banks. These 5 development banks have, as early as 2010, set up an agreement which they call the mutual enforcement of debarment decisions. And essentially, they have agreed to share information about firms and individuals who engage in wrongdoing on development bank funded projects. And you as a firm will need to indicate and show and give evidence of your firm's system to participate in these development bank funded projects. And that is the end of my presentation. I trust you found it informative. And then Wally, this is back to you again.
Thank you, Philip, for providing us and those who will be completing the MSD with valuable insights into an understanding of the MSD and the development of their own FIMS FIMS. So just a reminder that anyone wishing to revisit Philip's presentation, it will be available on the CESA website after the webinar. Next up and lastly is Roxanne Dovey, our 4th panelist, who's going to address us on the Project Sustainability Management System Declaration, also known as the PSM MSD. Roxanne has invested significant energy and expertise in finalizing this particular MSD and is well qualified, as were the others, to address us on this topic. And at this point, I'd like to hand over to Roxanne. So it's over to you, Roxanne. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wally, and thank you for that kind introduction. I'm very excited to be here today to share with you my passion and knowledge that I do have on sustainability. I've recently joined the quality subcommittee, and it's been exciting working with them, and I really hope that my presentation inspires you to investigate implementing a project sustainability management system for your firm. So first off, I'm going to be going through the presentation content. So I will provide an overview of the FIDIC document, which relates to project sustainability, having a look at the overview of the PSM MSD, having a look at certification, having a look at the main sections of the PSM MSD, as well as going through one or two of the MSD questions, and again with a similar format as per Diane's presentation of quality. And then, of course, having a look at benefits of implementing a PSM. There are numerous benefits, and I haven't listed all of them, but I will go through a few when we get there. And then I will also just be providing a case study, which is showing an example of what is happening on the global front in terms of sustainability and implementation of such technologies in the consulting and construction engineering space. All right, so just to provide an overview, the FIDIC Project Sustainability Applications Manual that was used to develop the MSD is to provide a guideline for consulting engineers to assist them with implementing major sustainability issues that we see being faced in projects. It is a great space to work. You know, when we work with sustainability, we need to look at it holistically, and we need the whole project team to come on board. Since working in sustainability alone, you know, well, as a sustainability consultant, when we go into a project, when I first started, we were always seen to be put like in a silo, and the whole project team was afraid of the sustainability consultant. Whereas now we're getting asked to come in more and more and work hand in hand with the engineers, and we need the engineers to assist us in ensuring that we have a sustainable future to work towards. So it's vitally important that this critical problem is raised, and that the role of consulting engineering, the role of the consulting engineering industry is they're imperative in helping us solve the issues that we are being faced with. I'm sure a lot of us are hearing the sustainability word again and again and again, and we tend to want to hide under a rock when we hear it. And I'm just here to try and encourage you not to feel that way when you look at the project sustainability management. And as it's been reiterated through the numerous slides, that the MSDs are not here to penalize, but it's here to get an understanding of how the member firms are operating and where they're at, and how we can assist the member firms to adhere to the requirements of CISA. So the objectives of the PSM is just to provide this a definition of the sustainable development and a context for PSM. It obviously has a look at those core issues which engineers need to consider. And then, of course, it also outlines sustainability considerations, you know, that should be looked at for implementation throughout the project life cycle. And then, of course, it also provides additional guidance and steps which the member firms can utilize to formulate their project sustainability management system. So just to provide an overview of the actual project sustainability MSD, it intends to provide all the members an opportunity to confirm if they have any sustainability or environmental certifications in place. I will talk about this a little bit more in the upcoming slide. It also provides members an opportunity to confirm if they have got a PSM in place, and then, of course, providing guidance on what aspects should be considered and included in order to have a holistic and well-rounded PSM. The MSD has got a total of 9 questions, so it's really not as intense as the other ones. So I encourage you all to really have a look at that and complete it. It requires a yes or no answer. And of course, there is a not applicable option 2. And as it's been mentioned, if you provide a yes, if you are claiming yes, that you do have PSM or whatever the question the MSD is asking you, you do not need to upload any documentation to the website, to the form. You just need to make sure that if you are the firm that is going to be requested for verification, verification reviews, that you have got that information available. So very important that if you do answer yes, you are selected, you will be required to provide that documentation upon request. And then of course, if it's not applicable, then you need to provide justification as to why you are claiming as not applicable. And the whole intention is to ensure that we're having that progress and we're seeing that development year on year. Talking about certification, so the intention here, unlike like Diane mentioned earlier in her presentation, you can provide your ISO 9001 certification and you don't have to answer the rest of the questions. With sustainability, if you have any sustainability or environmental certifications that you have received, no matter what certification it is, we are encouraging you to please provide us with information on those certifications, because we are wanting to understand what is happening in the industry and what sort of certifications are being achieved, and so we can research into that to see if it is addressing the FIDIC requirements, because at the moment there are no standards which actually tick all the boxes for the FIDIC guidelines. So we are going to do our best to develop these MSD, the sustainability MSD, as we go along. So we really do encourage you to provide us with that information, whether you think it's applicable or not. We will do the research behind that. So the main sections of the PSM, it's structured very similar to the rest of the MSDs. We've done this on purpose to try and make life easy for you guys. So the first section is leadership and planning. There are 3 questions that sit under this heading, and it's just having a look to see if there is if your company does have a formal project sustainability management system in place. There is additional guidance that is provided on the MSD, which assists you to understand what makes up a PSM. And then it also has a look at, is the project sustainability management system having a look at conserving energy, water, material consumption, and this needs to be applicable over the life of the project. It also needs to have a look at protection of the environment, health and safety, human rights, which would be applicable to interested parties, which can be affected by the project being implemented. And then, of course, making sure that there are roles and responsibilities assigned and that competent people are provided the opportunity to run with leading the development of the PSM and ensuring that it gets rolled out correctly and that there is adequate training provided, because there's no point in having great policy and then no one knows how to actually implement it. So we need to make sure that implementation is adequate. Very important just to highlight of this is that the PSM it is project related. So it is not phase related, it's project related, and the PSM needs to be applied to the overall project system and the phases. This means that if you're only awarded to do concept and viability, that your PSM is applicable for that stage. It can be applied for that stage. And if in design development, the client is not interested in doing sustainability, then that's okay. We're just seeing that you are doing your due diligence to try and encourage the client to consider sustainability aspects and the various initiatives that can be implemented. The policy needs to be applied to every single project that your company undertakes. But again, it's not the end of the world if you are only appointed in stage 3 or stage 4 of the project, or stage 1, for example. It just needs to be able to be applied to the various stages. I won't go into too much detail of any of the other questions that form part of the MSD. However, if you do need assistance with it, we do encourage you to reach out to CISA and share. Wally is welcome to share my details, and I'm happy to assist where I can. This is just an example of sustainability measures which can be applied during phases of the project lifecycle, and this is in line with achieving net zero carbon goals. So I'm not sure if all of you are aware of the Sustainable Development Goals, and with COP26 just having been the climate of the parties, new targets and agendas get set every year. They get set for the various countries that are signatories of COP to adhere to and meet. So Agenda 2030 is focusing on achieving net zero carbon for all new buildings and net zero carbon for all existing buildings by 2050. Now, of course, this is not just for the sake of doing it, it's for the sake of that the planet will survive without us, but we won't survive without the planet. So essentially, we're actually saving ourselves. We're not saving the planet. So it's imperative that we start considering, even if it's small changes, you don't need to be 100%. If it's small changes, it all adds up and makes a difference. And it's also just important to know that with these agendas, regulations are going to start being set, and companies need to be prepared for these regulations that are coming. For example, energy performance certificates are coming about. So we really are starting to see that government is getting on board, and we're getting regulations and mandates coming out. So this example is just providing the phases of how to achieve decarbonization on a project. So during the design phase, you would have a look at renewable energies, circular and low carbon materials. So looking at various materials. The materials aspect is very important in engineering at the moment. The case study actually will show an example of this. During construction, again, having a look at using recycled materials, or maybe reusing buildings, then rather, starting from scratch, and making sure we stay within the urban zones. Of course, prefabricated construction, we're seeing 3D clay modeling buildings being printed in sustainability innovation. So really, sustainability is an exciting space for engineers, and it's a space that I'm wanting to ignite the flame on and encourage people to think out the box and challenge your clients on it. And then, of course, during operations and maintenance, this is looking at how the project will actually run and how you can look at managing energy and water and having waste programs, recycling. So just quickly to touch on the benefits of implementing a PSM. As I said, there are numerous benefits. I've just listed a few here. And of course, most important one that I see in my space is future-proofing. So in order to future-proof yourself, your business, you need to be aware, that there are the agendas, that regulations are coming. You're going to be future-proofing yourself against these. So we're also seeing more and more tenders requesting for sustainability principles, strategies that are in place, sustainable procurement policies, etc. So in order to keep on top of business and winning more work, and that you're future-proofing yourself, you're future-proofing projects. So considering climate resilience. So again, climate resilience, climate change, we're seeing increased risks, especially with projects that are close to the coastlines, having to design for potential increased floods. In George, we've just been witnessing all of those floods. So it's really starting to consider all of those things in your project design. It's not just building as usual anymore, designing as usual. It's really thinking about what are the potential risks that are going to happen in the future. Of course, cost reduction. So having a look at using fewer resources on your project. So by reducing your energy and water during construction, and of course, reducing and reusing material also has benefits of cost reduction. And over the past 15 years, sustainability has been in South Africa being developed, quietly, and it's quite exciting that we're starting to see more and more industries taking up. So even in the logistics space, we're starting to see movement there. So there definitely is a new market emerging in terms of sustainability. So you want to be ready for that. Of course, project preservation, having a look at that you are conserving the environment as well as the well-being of communities where the projects are executed. I do think that our environmental law does assist us quite a bit with project preservation, but we're just wanting you guys to have a look at it in a holistic manner. And you know, it will become apparent over the next years, the advantages of green construction through the environmental benefits, financial benefits, and social benefits. Of course, you have a competitive advantage. So research has shown that the adoption of sustainability practices allows projects to rank highly, and therefore they would be more likely to be considered by clients, investors, and stakeholders. More and more, there are questions coming in about green funding, green investing. So very important to, again, start having a look at your sustainability practice and getting that in. Minimizes resource mismanagement, so it ties in quite nicely with the other MSDs. Increase organizational value. So this, again, it's not only having a look at what it's doing for the project, but it also increases your organizational value from customers in terms of their loyalty, but also for your employees. A lot of the younger generations that are up and coming, they're actually choosing where they want to work. So, and they're looking at things like, are you looking after the environment, because it's their future that is essentially at stake. So, yeah, increased organizational value is an important one, and one that I like to stress. Of course, overall success, enhanced project quality, which is a great tie-in with the QMS, MSD, and then, of course, room for innovation. So this is where I'll be talking to the case study. So again, it's providing all of you engineers, consultants, an opportunity for creative experimentation in the industry. So we're seeing more and more new materials coming out onto the market and actually being used due to innovative techniques that are being developed and implemented. So this I bring to you a very exciting case study, which was actually showcased at the Climate of the Parties 26's Build Better Now exhibition. It is a bridge that is actually made of laminated timber, and the designer and engineer was Arup, who is also a CISA member firm, and it was done in Amsterdam, Netherlands. And basically, you guys are welcome to go and do some research on this. It is available online. So if you research it, you will be able to get some more information. And of course, if there are any Arup members or engineers with us today, again, just to maybe have a look at what is happening globally. And to also ask some more questions on that. But basically, the bolt conceived for bridges with this is conceived for bridges with a span of 25 meters. They use high quality cross-laminated timber for the bridge deck, and this is protected with waterproof membrane. And then, of course, the asphalt deck and glued laminated timber for the main beams. It can be applied to new construction or for bridge deck renovations, which is quite exciting. What the project did is that all timber is harvested from local FSC. So FSC is Forest Stewardship Council forests. So it's making sure that the wood is harvested in a sustainable manner. And it was then processed into glulam by the local manufacturers, so thereby minimizing transport costs and emissions. So highlighting the importance of trying to keep things local. Not only is that good for our local economy, but also in terms of reducing costs and the associated emissions with greenhouse gases. What's very exciting about this project, and what I really wanted to share, is the circular economy thinking. become it. Sometimes we think it's like way out there, but if you apply yourself, it really does start to make sense. So the structure can actually be disassembled and rebuilt, which actually then allows the bridges to be widened or reused easily. So instead of just cutting the road off and not worrying about that bridge anymore and building a new bridge, this actually will allow bridges to be expanded, widened. So it is allowing for adaptation rather than use, demolish, waste, and repeat model. Another exciting example I saw is that bridges that are redundant, they build it into a awesome environmental corridor for animals to cross over. And of course, that then increases biodiversity with planting trees, et cetera, et cetera. Back to the laminated bridge is that it is designed to actually have 4 life cycles before it actually gets recycled and put back into the economy. So what is great is that the whole structure it actually makes the entire structure carbon neutral due to the total weight being renewable energy, which of course reduces the environmental impact. So these are all studies and research, and you can go and check the details on that online. And of course, it's just showing technological advances and novel approaches to circular infrastructure design is demonstrating how we can achieve a more sustainable future. And I have included the link below, so you guys can go and check that out online. And then this is just to show you those 4 life cycles. So the first life, it is built to be a heavy traffic bridge. In its second life, it is used as a bicycle pedestrian bridge. Third life, it gets used in housing. And in the 4th life, it gets used into furniture before it goes back in and then gets repurposed in for the circular economy. So you can see it's a closed loop. So very exciting. I hope that has inspired you. And yeah, I look forward to seeing more completed MSDs and assisting you guys however we can going forward. So with that, I thank you for your time and patience. I know I was probably a little bit longer than all of the other delegates, but I am very passionate about it. So please, at any time, if you need any help, please feel free to reach out. And with that, I hand over back to Wally. Thank you, Wally.